Most retirees don't plan their housing around their kids. They plan around independence, control, not being a burden, and that makes total sense. What almost no one plans for is how quietly family changes the equation. Sometimes it feels like overnight, not with the emergencies, not with ultimatums, just gradually. And once it starts, it's very hard to pretend that it's not happening to you. And here's what catches most people off guard. This almost never happens when you're actually in the position to help. It happens right after you've done with what felt like the responsible and right thing to do. You've downsized, you've simplified, you reduced the space, you felt ahead of any potential problems, and then life re-enters the picture. And usually it starts small. It starts with a phone call, a question, a favor. And sometimes it's framed as temporary, sometimes it's framed as practical, and sometimes it's framed as, can we just take some time to figure this all out for a little bit? That's the moment the house stops being neutral. It either absorbs the pressure or it becomes the pressure. And I see this from a very unique position. I'm in my 30s and I've been doing this long enough that families and friends of families trust me to handle the sale of their parents' homes and help them transition into something carefully and that's going to be better suited. Often it's referrals or friends of friends or situations where people just want someone who cares and to help them to get where they want to go. And what's striking is how often the plans change right after the sale. Let's say the house sells, the parents move, and everything finally feels settled. And then something happens on the adult child side, a divorce, a financial hit, a job loss, a mental health struggle, an addiction issue, a gambling problem, or a marriage that just didn't hold. Suddenly the kids need to move back in, but the space is gone. This isn't rare. It happens way more often than you would like to think, and it's honestly a pattern, not because anybody has actually failed, but because the original housing decision assumed stability in a phase of life that is anything but stable. And as parents, you already know your kids better than anybody else. You know who's resilient, you know who's vulnerable, you know who might need a little extra help, even if they don't need it today. What most people don't anticipate is when that need actually shows up, and more importantly, whether the house can actually handle it. And I'm thinking of a situation in particular. The names, of course, they don't matter. A couple that I knew had done everything right. We helped them sell the larger family home, helped them move into something smaller, single floor, lower maintenance. Felt like a win for the whole family. The move went incredibly smooth. They settled in, and life slowed down finally. And then, about a year later, one of the adult children went through a divorce. At first, it was temporary. Just needed a place to land, just for a little bit. But the new house, it didn't have separation. No second living room, no buffer, and those weeks of them staying turned into months. And nobody was angry. Nobody did anything wrong, but the house wasn't built for that version of life. That story isn't unique. It's just easier to see it when it happens to somebody else that's not you. And this is where people realize square footage alone is never the answer. What mattered was separation. Homes that absorb family pressure well tend to share one thing in common. They allow adults to live without constantly colliding. Something like an in-law suite, a finished basement with a full bath and bedroom, a converted space above a garage. It's not about luxury, it's about buffer. And this is the moment where budgets actually start to quietly shift. At first, people think, we don't want to spend more. Then reality begins to set in. Not feeling trapped in your own home, it has value. Not feeling like a guest in your own space, that has value. And not having grandchildren sleeping 10 feet from your bedroom also has value. And this is where people start wishing they had thought differently from the start. Not about size, about function, not about price, about pressure tolerance. There's another option some retirees actually don't consider soon enough as well. A second property, not as a vacation home, not as a luxury, but as a pressure valve. A modest rental, something practical, something income producing. It works as an investment today, and if life changes in any way, it becomes a place for adult children to land that isn't your spare bedroom. And that distance honestly preserves relationships more than people would ever expect. This isn't about avoiding your kids, it's about preserving the relationship. Closeness without collapse, help without resentment, support without surrendering your life. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most retirees assume family pressure will be emotional. In reality, it's logistical. Where do they sleep? How long do they stay? Where do they work? And where do the kids go to school? And if the house can't absorb that, you absorb it instead. That's why families don't ask whether your housing plan is ready. They just show up anyway and derail it. And the longer you wait to adjust, the fewer clean options will actually remain. The retirees who navigate this best aren't the ones who predicted everything perfectly. They're the ones who built the little flexibility in before it was urgent. They gave themselves room to respond instead of react. And that's the real shift, from independent retirement to connected retirement. And most people don't realize they've crossed that line until the house tells them. The next question isn't whether you love your kids enough, it's whether your housing decision can support the life you're actually living now. Because the home that worked in one phase of retirement doesn't often work that well in the next one. And that's what we need to talk about next.